Batteries are little packs of power that ride the absolute limit of human knowledge about physics, chemistry, and mechanical engineering. They provide levels of energy density that are just as mind-boggling, if not more so, than the computer processors that energy supports. All of this cosmic power begs one question though. What even is a battery? Thanks to today's sponsor, iFixit. You can learn how to fix just about anything at iFixit.com. Search through thousands of free repair guides and find the high-quality parts and precision tools to fix your phones, laptops, game consoles, and so much more. iFixit is getting into the portable soldering game with their new Fix Hub. This is an all-inclusive benchtop soldering kit that can be used on the go with its own internal battery. This tool can heat up to as hot as 200 to 400 degrees Celsius. So if you want to fix or upgrade your own mechanical keyboard on the go, the Fix Hub is the kit to get you there. Click the link below to pre-order your own Fix Hub today. Let's start simple before we get into the dark technological rabbit hole. Batteries are containers that store chemical energy and then release that chemical energy as electrical energy. There are a huge variety of different battery types, different chemical makeups, different components and structures, so many different things. So keep that in mind as our point of origin. Like that will be our bulwark in the storm of the craziness we're going to talk about today. Is all this does is hold chemicals in a certain way to release those chemicals later as electricity. You might not be surprised to know that I'm a program manager. I'm not an electrical engineer. In fact, you could say, and I'm sure many engineers have said, that program managers are the natural enemy of the engineer. So, be sure to fact check me in the comments if I get something wrong. I don't take offense. There are 4 key parts in a battery: the cathode, the positive side of the battery, the anode, the negative side of the battery, a separator that prevents contact between the cathode and the anode, and a chemical solution known as an electrolyte that allows the flow of electrical charge between the cathode and the anode. You can have disposable batteries, such as AA and AAA varieties, that must be thrown away once their chemical potential is exhausted, and you have rechargeable batteries, such as the lithium ion ones that live inside of your cell phone. One of the craziest things about batteries is their history. Before I started researching them for this video, honestly, I would have guessed that the first batteries showed up about the time of the identification of electricity. You know, Ben Franklin, the key, the kite. You get it, right? However, batteries stretch all the way back to the Parthian period over 2,000 years ago. If that sounds familiar, you may know the Parthian Empire from such hits as being formed by one of Alexander the Great's generals, being so large that their ruler Mithridates II called himself the King of Kings, and destroying the army of Marcus Licinius Crassus at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC. And yes, I'm assuming I mispronounced at least half of those words. And they also produced the oldest battery in a clay pot. This battery was discovered in a rural village outside the city of Baghdad. Before we get the tinfoil hats on to say the ancient Parthians were texting each other, the most likely use of this clay pot battery was for metal plating versus actually checking out what everybody is doing this weekend on the gram. I don't actually know what cool people do or what they check. Jumping ahead in time to more contemporary technology, not modern technology, but further in the line. In the 1800s, an Italian scientist by the name of Alessandro Volta invented something that could provide a small but sustained amount of electricity. Volta's device operated by soaking cloth in salt water and then smashing that cloth between zinc and copper discs. Remember, we talked about anodes and cathodes earlier. You can see this in this picture from the National Museum of American History. It's odd that an Italian scientist's invention is on hand at the National Museum of American History. When these two metals come into contact with each other, they create a difference in potential, or as is known today, voltage. These voltic piles are where we can set the tick in the timeline, showing essentially the birth of the modern battery. Look, there are a ton of marks on this timeline that get us from voltaic piles to me watching cat videos while riding on an airplane, and that would take a ton of time, and it would be very boring. Well, even more boring than this video is probably already going to be. So we're not going to discuss each of the tick marks, but there's one more key discovery without which modern power storage probably would look much different. Enter Waldemar Junger and his accumulator. Let's be honest, that name goes so hard. This was the most exciting part of the video I wanted to talk about. It's such a good name that I'm surprised that I'm not talking about cell phone accumulators in this video. That's Such a better name than battery, and it's not even close. The importance of Waldemar and his accumulator, and such a good name, is that where his contemporaries were working off of less reliable and less sustainable tech in those old style batteries, where the metal or the conductor was taking part in the chemical reaction, leading to that battery having a reduced lifespan. Waldemar went through a series of revisions and ended up with a nickel iron style accumulator that was lighter and less expensive than what else was available at the time. A short time later, Thomas Edison patented his own nickel iron battery, and after a series of legal challenges, Thomas Edison won the dispute. And side note, I was born and grew up in Ohio, and Thomas Edison is kind of a folk hero there. Something that I've learned about growing up is your folk heroes are sometimes more ethically gray than you originally thought. Yes, my beard attempt, can you see my beard here, is causing me to grow up faster, I guess. Or I'm already grown up and old with helmet. Do you see how much gray is in here? Either way, this is how we went from metal plating around the time of Alexander the Great to holding and refilling electrical charges in a sustainable way. From here, there is an explosion, sometimes literally, yes, I am quite proud of that pun, thank you. There's an explosion of different metal combinations and styles of battery. Generally speaking, they are segmented into two camps. We already talked about them. Rechargeable and non-rechargeable. We're gonna focus on, again, just like this, the rechargeable family of batteries. So in the rechargeable camp, there are four main types. There's nickel cadmium, lead acid, nickel metal hydride, and our old friends lithium ion. Hey, I've heard of those. If you go to the grocery store, or I guess any store that sells batteries, when you see the 4-pack of AA or AAA rechargeable ones, chances are those are nickel cadmium or nickel metal hydride. We'll talk about it in a second. And another fun fact, this style was also originally invented by our accumulator boy, Waldemar. That dude was a battery making fiend. Nickel cadmium strike a balance between charge density, cost, and longevity when compared against the rest of the styles we'll talk about today. Lead acid batteries are actually the oldest style of rechargeable batteries. You heard me talk about lead batteries, way back in the day. These are slightly different. Obviously, they last a long time. They have less energy density than the rest of the family, but they can provide high surge currents while being relatively cheap. When you think lead acid battery, think car batteries or some home-sized solar power battery banks. We're not gonna dwell too long on these, but they are worth a mention as they are everywhere. Lithium technology is slowly replacing them, but they are, again, if I looked at my truck today, I would find a lead acid battery. Nickel metal hydride are very similar to the nickel cadmium from a couple of paragraphs ago. They are a slightly newer style design that can have a much higher energy density to their cadmium-based brethren, and benefit of that, they can also be smaller at the same time. Those batteries do have an issue with discharging under use, so I guess if you wanted to, you could have a bigger discussion of the trade-offs when comparing this versus nickel cadmium, but we're not going to do that today. Just know that those two styles are very similar. There are also some very exciting breakthroughs happening in the battery space, but we'll talk about those in a later section. So I guess just here, you stay on the edge of your seats for right now. You're only going to need the edge. You bought a ticket for your whole seat here, but you're only gonna need the edge. On to the star of the show, lithium ion. Woo, the crowd goes wild. Li-ion, it's so great. If I wanted to max out the length of this video, we could go in more depth of the multiple different chemistries that make up Li-ion. That's what the cool kids call lithium ion. Very abbreviated, Li-ion batteries are very energy dense, they're reasonably priced, and they're shockingly lightweight. It's not all perfect, and we'll discuss some of the detriments shortly, but the work done on Li-ion created a battery so useful to modern society that 3 scientists were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2019 for the work they did here. Legitimately, this battery type is everywhere. Even here, when I'm in a national forest 12 miles away from my car, do I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the phone. So 5 things that have lithium ion or Li-ion batteries inside of them. It's not just when I'm sitting at my home office, am I surrounded by tech where all the batteries are. I mean, look out here. We're in the woods. You can't escape from these batteries. They're everywhere. Phones, laptops, big versions are in hybrid and electric vehicles. Personally, I don't think it's a stretch to say that modern life doesn't look the way it does today without the ability to hold, store, and safely discharge the amount of electricity found in the Li-ion battery. So to John Goodenough, M. Stanley Whittingham, and Akira Yoshino, you win the Everyday Dad Fist Bump of Excellence for 2024, or 2019 when you won the Nobel Prize. Battery fanboyism aside, when did cell phones even start using these? So to understand the batteries inside of them and why companies have moved towards Li-ion, we're gonna briefly touch on the history of the cell phone. I promise we're not gonna delve too far into this, but it's like every time I found information about the battery, there was another rabbit hole. This is a rabbit hole made up of rabbit holes. Much like batteries, cell phones are probably older than you might realize. The first mobile phone call was made back in 1973, which is, yes, surprisingly older than I am by about a decade. This was done by Bell Labs and their Dynatac. 10 years later, Motorola released the Dynatac 8000X, which was a big, bulky beast of a machine that was shown on the world stage as not only the first cell phone, but also the first cell phone shown in a movie by appearing alongside Michael Douglas in the movie Wall Street. And frankly, that phone was so big, it looks to be just about as big as old Greed is Good Gordon Gekko. What makes this important for our discussion today, though, is the Dynatac 8000X, or the 8000X as we'll say for the rest of the video. It didn't use lithium ion batteries, because if you've been paying attention, and yes, there will be a test at the end, so I hope you are taking notes. I hope you took notes. Lithium ion didn't exist in a marketable way back in the 1980s, so the 8000X used a nickel cadmium battery that reportedly took 10 hours to charge to give 30 minutes of time. Woof. That's essentially the opposite of modern phones today that aim to give you 10 hours of use for 30 minutes of charging. See why lithium ion is so important? Okay, yeah, Look, I have found these batteries to be fascinating and really exciting, and I'm getting kind of ahead of myself. Here's where it's really hard though. Going from what was to what is was way harder than I expected. Remember, these batteries are a rabbit hole made up of rabbit holes. I spent hours trying to find the first cell phone to actually use Li-ion batteries. It was pretty easy to find that Sony first started mass producing Li-ion in 1991 to sell as camcorder batteries. Remember camcorders? Young folks watching, there was a time when every family event would have that one uncle that would walk around the whole time with a gigantic camera on their shoulder. Either way, going through a list of cell phones released throughout the same time wasn't as useful or as fast as I had hoped. The first contender might have been the Sony Mars Bars CMH333 released in 1992, but looking at an eBay listing had it showing a nickel cadmium battery. I also thought the NEC P100 released in 1993 might have been another Li-ion trendsetter, but nope. Nickel cadmium here again. Nickel cadmium. I even looked across the pond to see if non-US phones might have done it first, but even the Orbital 902 released in 1993 has a nickel metal hydride battery. At least it wasn't nickel cadmium. I must have searched through dozens of analog and digital phones, but the Motorola MicroTac Elite, it's the first phone that I was able to find that used lithium ion batteries. This phone was released back in 1995, and even today, I think it looks pretty darn awesome. And yes, I am pretty sure that's the nostalgia talking. When you get into your middle age, nostalgia stops being like a neat little reminder of things from when you were younger and becomes big brain claws that you just like, it's really hard to shake. So I probably don't even have a choice to think that that's cool. From here, the floodgates open, and it's not too long before all those other standards fall to the wayside. Even the cheapest of budget phones today, like the TracFone Blue Flex that runs for something like $20, even those run lithium ion batteries, as you cannot match the price to energy density with anything else. Or anything else yet. We will talk about some cool future stuff in a minute. Even one of my original smartphones, the HTC Evo from like, what was this, 2010? Even it used a lithium ion battery. Look at this. Also, look at how easy it was to change. Li-ion is great. These batteries have totally changed the world, but why when you Google lithium ion does fire show up as like the second option? Are these batteries dangerous? So, okay, part of the trade-off in having a ton of energy of any kind, electrical, kinetic, chemical, etc. When you have all of that squeezed into a tiny space, it does become a little more dangerous than, say, a rock of the equivalent size and weight. That's not to say that these are incredibly dangerous. I am not trying to fearmonger today, but we can't talk about the truth of these innovations without talking some of the pitfalls as well. Probably the most public-facing issue with lithium-ion batteries came from Samsung and their Note lineup. Back in 2016, Samsung released the Note 7 cell phone. And okay, another rabbit hole we're gonna avoid. Without diving into the history of Samsung cell phones, I'll summarize by saying Samsung generally has a big cell phone line and, I don't know, a regular cell phone line. This is the S24 Ultra, this is the S24 regular. See? There's a bigger one and a smaller one. Now this started with the Note series of phones, which were supposed to be phablets. Man, I can't remember the last time I said that. But they were a combination of tablet and cell phone to provide more real estate for those that wanted to do more than just talk or tech. It seems like a non-issue now because even regular cell phones are pretty gigantic, but there was a time when cell phones were trending smaller and smaller before, they started replacing all other types of home computing. The Note 7 was released with a few key updates over previous models. This was the first Samsung phone with USB-C, a now ubiquitous charging connector. It had a big screen, lots of power for the time, etc. However, after these first hit the market, a disturbing trend started to make the news. The Note 7s were exploding. Not just fires, but like actual exploding. Investigation showed that this was due to manufacturing defects from both contracted suppliers, like people Samsung paid to make the batteries, but also Samsung internal divisions. This was such a widespread problem that on October 13th, 2016, Samsung expanded an initial recall to all Galaxy Note 7 devices. They would take your phone and give you another Samsung phone or totally refund your purchase price. That's a pretty staggering course correction that you don't see very often in the mobile technology world. Now, this isn't just a problem for cell phones though. The video is about cell phones, but anything that uses a lithium ion battery could have this problem. Improper use, maintenance, disposal, and charging of lithium ion batteries, that has led to an uptick in battery fires around the world as more and more tech starts incorporating these. Well, if these things are so magical and not dangerous, why does my phone barely hold a charge a year after I bought it? Why does my battery get worse over time? And you might say to yourself, it's planned obsolescence. The company's trying to force me to buy something new. Okay, well, there is some pretty awful planned obsolescence things that go on. If you want to hear more about that, watch my last video about disposable technology. But for this, the battery works through a chemical reaction process, and over time, batteries are unable to hold the same amount of charge after repeated cycles of use because the chemical reaction degrades over time. And the name of this phenomenon is battery degradation. For a quick citation, I'm pulling a lot of this information from a 2019 master's thesis written by Xiyu Zhang. This paper it's a fascinating look at lithium ion batteries as a whole. And if you really want to understand the underlying science behind Li-ion, I highly recommend checking that paper out. I will leave a link to it in the description below. Back to the video though. Battery degradation breaks out into two main types: calendar and operational. Calendar degradation comes from the fact that over a period of time, no matter what the chemicals inside of the battery are, they lose their ability to hold a charge over time. And this process starts the second a battery is made. Operational degradation comes from using the battery, the cycles of charging and discharging through use of, watching cat videos on an airplane. When I say cycle here, you could imagine a cycle of a battery being the process of going from 100% to 0%. That's like one cycle. But that's generally not something that happens in the real world. Looking at my phone's charge history, it looks like I rarely go below 25%, and I frequently charge without letting it get to exactly 100%. So even a period of those, over time could be considered a cycle, depending on how much energy is put into and taken out of said battery. There are multiple reasons for the degradation of Li-ion batteries, but today I want to focus on three of them. First is going to be temperature. Quoting the paper, high temperatures cause thermal decomposition of the electrodes and electrolyte. Remember, cathode, anode, electrolyte is the gel or the liquid in the middle. Decomposition of the electrolyte increases the SEI, solid electrolyte interphase, film thickness on the anode, which consumes lithium ion, leading to reduced battery capacity. The second cause is depth of discharge, or DOD. When you discharge a lithium ion battery past 50%, you've done what's called a deep discharge. These deep cycles cause pressure in lithium ion cells and damage negative electrode sites. And thirdly, for reasons your battery may be degrading, is charge voltage. This is the amount of power put into the battery during charging. Yes, the more power you put into the battery, the faster it will charge, but again from the paper, charging Li-ion above 4.1 volts per cell leads to lithium plating, which increases the loss of lithium ions as they form metallic lithium on the anode. The reason I included those last two is they seem to be major selling points of any new smartphone these days. all-day battery, and fast charging. A key point is, though, most cell phone operating systems anymore do have special battery saver modes that will allow smart management of your battery health to let you decide what is more important to you. Do you want all-day charge and all that fast charging, high-capacity race car lifestyle that will go fast but burn your battery out sooner? Or you can choose the slower charging, more managed profile that might take longer, but it will ensure your battery lasts much longer compared to others. But that leads to an interesting question. If all batteries degrade over time, how easy or how hard is it to replace mine? So when you should replace your battery is kind of hard to say. I searched and there is no just set in stone rule. Manufacturers, insurance companies, or third-party repair shops, nobody says like, hey, at X% you should change it. Most of the wisdom comes down to, are you still getting what you need from your phone on a day-to-day basis? Like if your phone dies halfway through what you need it to do, okay, that's probably time to change your battery. If you have something like Apple Care, they will replace it at under 80%. Apple Care could cover it, but if you don't have Apple Care, that would set you back $99. Which is pretty darn expensive. 10% of an expensive phone's initial cost has to be reinvested back into it a year or so later to keep it running. I guess that's not completely crazy, as cars need maintenance too, so I guess we'll call that cost of ownership for a phone. Look at how easy it used to be. HTC Evo, remember? Look at this, if I needed to replace the battery, boom, hey, new battery. Done. Man, that's so easy. But how hard is it to replace a modern battery? Let's actually see how hard it is and do this for a third of the cost. Okay, I'll meet you over at the workbench. All right, team, it's been about 2 weeks. It took me 2 weeks to go from my computer over to here to try to do a battery replacement on my iPhone 12 mini that you saw in the thumbnail. Look, we did get it. We did get it to work. We got this thing open. This was a nightmare. Do not try to do this yourself unless you're some kind of expert on this. Like I had to buy a lot of specialized tools just to get this far, and to get all these tiny little screws back in and to get the new battery in there. I thought it was going to be a lot easier. It was a huge pain in the butt. So shame on companies that have started to do this kind of thing on your battery. Like I said earlier, well, it was a few seconds for you. It's been weeks for me. Look at how easy it used to be. Hey, I needed to change a battery. Hey, here's the battery. Hey, there's the new battery. Like, come on, fam. Like, it should be that easy to replace our batteries. Yes, my beard is a lot grayer than I expected it to be now that it's starting to come in. Okay, back to the video. So that's mobile battery tech as it exists today, but what might it look like in the future? Will we get even more unlimited cosmic power, but without all the potential fire, the explodey bits? I don't like the explodey bits, Gary. From my research, the most likely and promising next step for batteries as a whole, and cell phone batteries in specific, are solid-state batteries. Solid-state batteries essentially take the gel or the liquid insides of a battery, like the ones we've been talking about today, and replaces those with solid electrolytes like ceramics or even glass-based electrolytes. This gives them a more robust design that should provide much more energy density and also provide less degradation compared to Li-ion and those other currently popular battery types. These aren't exactly cutting-edge tech, as solid electrolytes were discovered way back in the 1800s, and they're even in use today in such places as pacemakers and other small products. But using them at scale in larger designs is currently going through some development. The most recent update states that in January 2024, Volkswagen released the results of a solid-state battery test showing that an electric vehicle powered by a solid-state battery retained 95% of its capacity after driving 500,000 kilometers. That mind blown. If we could get that kind of degradation prevention scaled down to cell phone batteries, you might actually be able to have that 7-year upgrade cycle that the major companies seem to be aiming for without needing to replace the battery, or even applications for smaller, lighter phones that I can't think of because honestly, I'm not that creative of a person. And yeah, that's the truth of cell phone batteries. With our reliance on mobile devices, there is an even more pressing need for mobile power. These things are little technological miracles in and of themselves, and we could spend hours just deep diving each of the rabbit holes that this rabbit hole has led me down. Thanks for watching.